Travillian NEXT is hosted by the Travillian Group. Please visit www.travilliangroup.com to learn more about our specialty in the placement of board members, C-level executives, and other professionals within community banks and credit unions. And now, the premiere episode of Travillian NEXT. Welcome, viewers. My name is Brian Love. I am the head of depository recruiting at the Travillian Group. We're extremely passionate about the community banks space, and we decided that it would be a really good idea to invite on some of our friends and guests that are really innovating within the financial institution space. Folks that are embracing fintechs, folks that are, rocking the boat a little and thinking a little differently in this industry that is a little bit more antiquated than most. And that's what Travillian NEXT is. So we're excited to start. I will hand it over to Keith Daly to get things started with our first guest. Keith?
Welcome, everybody, to our premiere episode of Travillian NEXT. Want to welcome our first guest, Patrick Sells from Quontic Bank. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick is joining us from beautiful Cabo San Lucas this morning. I think it's 7 a.m. there. Looks like a beautiful day, as usual. Patrick is the Chief Innovation Officer at Quontic Bank in New York City. Also, 2020 Digital Banker of the Year by American Banker, among many other awards. We've gotten to know Patrick very well over the last 6 to 7 months. And the one thing that really came up, Patrick, back in March and April, was the amount of phone calls you were receiving from community banks. Just how do we survive this pandemic? How do we become more digital? Because basically over the span of 4 weeks, every bank in America became a digital bank. I know you've taken this knowledge and kind of looked at it as a business opportunity now to help community banks with a new initiative called True Digital, right, which will kind of give them a roadmap, if that's the best way to say it, a blueprint to becoming a more digitally focused bank. Could you give us kind of a quick overview of the questions you were receiving initially, still are, and what True Digital is?
Yeah, and great to be with you guys, Keith and Brian. I've really appreciated our friendship and partnership personally and professionally in 2020. But to your point, American Banker was kind enough this year to award me with Digital Banker of the Year. And that really elevated Quontic's story and gave some credibility to us. And I think, what's happened in the last 2 years since I've been here, we've kind of transformed from your very traditional branch-focused community bank to a leading digital bank. And in that story, there's been a lot of lessons learned, from talent to fintechs to cores and everything. And, we wanted to be able to help and share that. I think one of the things I was surprised by when I came into the industry was that many banks don't want to actually share with each other. There's a sense of competition maybe. And, the world I was in before, very oftentimes I'd share with other companies and peers of mine what was going on. And so probably talked to 150, 155 banks, to your point, and realized we could really probably formalize this, and it would be a great way to help the industry. And so the idea behind True Digital is that we want to help banks find their true digital identity. And I think it's really important nuance in all of that, in this idea of identity, because yes, even you look at the three of us, we're all humans, but we all are also uniquely different, right? And I think how, as a community bank, what is your digital identity is critical. And it's not just you need technology or digital everything. You really got to understand who you are and what you need. And so that's the idea behind True Digital. And so what we do is we took the Quontic story, what we learned, the policies and procedures that we needed for different fintechs, let's say, or risk assessments, et cetera. And we make that available for free to banks who want help. And the process starts with really getting to understand your balance sheet, because that's critical. And most fintechs don't know how to talk about that, for example. What's your balance sheet? Who's your customer? Where's your revenue sources? And then how do you fit in digital into that? And, again, even if you look at the Quontic story, not everything we did will apply to everyone, but there's probably some things that you can take and go, and there's maybe something from another bank. And so really wanting to kind of help advance the industry, if you will, with True Digital. And so that's what it is, and really excited to have you guys as partners in it.
Yeah, that's terrific, Patrick. We're excited to be recruitment partners.
Thank you.
Within True Digital, and obviously talent is our foray. So the question I had for you is about talent. You've now talked to hundreds of different banks, and almost every bank out there has a CTO, a CIO, or COO, somebody that's like really the epicenter of technology. Is total reinvention what they need to do? Like, what do you think there's a lack of? Is it knowledge? Is it will? Is it fear?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brian. And, it's probably different, for every bank, but I do think there are some themes. I think you're right in that many banks have a CTO, let's say, or an IT team. But, one of the things that's missing in that is the rest of the staff isn't oftentimes that digitally native. And so I think the greatest existential threat to the industry is actually culture and recruiting. I think we've lost the war on talent. And so my generation and the ones even younger than me, we grew up digitally native, but we didn't come out of college saying we want to go work at a community bank. Yeah. So the challenge now is, it's not that you necessarily, I think, need to get a millennial in a technology role. I think just getting younger people in any role at the bank, they're going to naturally be thinking about how do you use technology and why not this? I've seen it like that. And that will infuse the organization with a new life. And I think that's really critical culturally anyways. I think one of the things that doesn't work is to try to say, well, digital is going to be over here, right? We're going to pigeon it, and then the rest of the bank's here. It really needs to permeate the whole bank. And, one of the things I'd share on that note, I think there's a lot of, again, anxiety is what the word that comes to mind about, am I a community bank or a digital bank? And I think that's also kind of silly. Why can't you be both, right? And if you say it that way, it changes even how you think about things. The first month on the job, we rolled out a new tagline, the adaptive digital bank. Nothing had changed. Same mobile app, same online banking, no new tools, but it caused everyone in the organization to start saying, okay, how could we use digital, right? And at first it felt a little bit weird, but then it began to work, and that really helped drive Quontic collectively forward, if you will, to becoming who we are today.
Patrick, what you said before was something I speak to clients, executives, board members, and that's something I hear from very innovative banks. Why do you have to be either or? Why do you have to be community bank or digital bank?
I obviously very much agree. I don't think it is an either or. I think we need to stop as an industry talking even like that. But I do, and I think there's some ways like banks that feel maybe a bit paralyzed as to what to do or where to go. Mm-hmm. There's some easy things they can do. Like one of the things we have to recognize is inherent to any community bank today, we are using technology, right? In some means we have online banking or mobile app, whatever. But yet in many of our boards, we don't have young people who have technology experience, right? When I was running my company before coming to Quontic, I would go get someone who worked at a CPA office to be kind of the financial representative. I would go grab one of the senior partners at one of the big law firms to have a legal representative, right? I constructed my board around the talent that I needed to drive me to where I wanted to go. And, I don't know that there's hardly any bank board members under the age of 40, let's say, let alone who have experience in technology outside of the industry in particular. And so if you don't know maybe where you want to go or what the position you need to hire yet is, go invite someone onto your board and they'll get to know you and they'll be able to start giving you ideas, and maybe they become someone you want to hire or not. But I do think that's one of the things I'd love to see the industry do. I think would have, just transformative impact if all of a sudden started grabbing 29, 30, 40, 35, 40, 25-year-olds even who have digital marketing and technology experience and putting them on the boards.
And Patrick, we've seen the emergence of technology, kind of integrating itself onto boards. There's a couple banks we deal with who have landed some really great talent from payments, other fintechs. And so, that seems to be a trend, although there's probably still not enough that are embracing that. My question is more on the board side. If you're addressing a board and you can kind of sense there's someone excited by technology and everyone kind of knows they need to reinvent themselves, what are the first couple questions you may ask them, literally in a board meeting?
That's a great question, Brian. One, it kind of depends. This isn't necessarily in chronological order per se, but one, I asked many times, do you use Uber? How much do you use Uber, right? Or do you use your Starbucks app to order your coffee? And most everyone goes, yes. And I say, okay, why is it that you adopted and embraced this kind of technology that you can order Starbucks from your phone? Well, because it's really easy. Okay, great. And you see the power that's had. Now, you may not be sure that digital is what you need for your bank. You may not be sure you need to go spend all this money or where to go. But what you can start with is, what's the experience of just working with using your own bank? It's probably not as easy, right? Like you go try to open up an account, whether that's at the branch or if they have an online account opening, see how long it takes, right? And then go look at Chime, go look at Acorns, see how easy it is, right? And so that's one piece of it, is you got to kind of almost bring it back home to what's it actually feel and experience like. And then the second thing, I think usually it's around getting them comfortable with, with taking a risk, right? And part of that means culture. And then how do we talk about the culture of your organization? How do you need to do this differently for it to really work? But it is important that you bring everyone along, right? And that's one of the big things, try to focus on.
So, Patrick, going back to what I was talking about before, when the banks were calling you, what was their biggest fear? I mean, from the CEO level to the board level, whoever was calling you, what were they worried about at that time? And COVID definitely expedited everything, but what was kind of their first question to you? Or were they just kind of looking to you as a therapist to kind of listen to their issues and problems?
I think it's their biggest concern is really, I don't know what to do. I feel like I need to do something. And, I spend a lot of time trying to actually calm that down, right? Because even like in our story, when I first got to Quontic, and one of the things that Steve did, because I came from outside the industry, our CEO, that first year, we shared a desk. I was in every conversation he was, and vice versa. And that helped me really understand banking regulations and how a bank works. I think that's one of the things we need to do as banks if we want to bring in other talent. But even back then, like when I first got in, I remember feeling this anxiety, like we're going to be behind. And we started going to every fintech conference possible. And we started signing up for all kinds of fintechs and new initiatives. And 2 years later, I think almost every single one of those we've killed or stopped, because we realized it didn't make sense. We'd implement this thing and 5 customers would use it. And so again, this anxiety, this need, and that causes bad decisions. And so I spend a lot of time, let's calm down, right? Let's understand we are digital today as already. And then where do we go from here? And I think there's also a lot of times people have questions around how does the regulators look at this? And, I would say, look, I think the regulators are desperate for banks to innovate. It's the opposite. It's not don't innovate. We need to be compliant and safe in how we do it.
Yeah.
But look, they see what's happening in the world just like we do. They see these fintechs popping up, right? Fintechs aren't regulated. And, that's not necessarily good for the stability of the system. I'm not saying fintechs are bad, but, part of America's strengths has been the stability of our financial system, and banks need to innovate. And so I think you can have much more open conversations with them, ask them questions. Their Office of Innovation is great. I've used it several times during open hours. So it's, what do I do and how are the regulators going to think about this?
Yeah, and you saw, Jelena McWilliams, the chairwoman of the FDIC, is a huge proponent of fintech.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear you say that. Just to go back to something else that you said, when you were addressing boards, you mentioned digital account opening being kind of up there in terms of a way to differentiate yourself, or at least that maybe that first step to kind of, transform your bank.
Right.
So I don't know if you agree with that. And then secondly, what are the other maybe 2 or 3 products or services that a bank can easily kind of jump into that water?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I do think online account opening is kind of becoming table stakes, right? Much like we all had to have mobile apps at some point, you have to kind of have online account opening, and you can also use that technology in your branch. Like it takes 3 minutes to open an account with us today. There's no teller that can do that faster, right? So we have a kiosk with an iPad in the branch, and we have it for online. You can really infuse, again, the whole bank. But with online account opening, where I see a challenge is what a lot of us have done, and we did this at first, is we use what our core offered. And our cores are great for certain things and not so good for others. And so we would roll, like our initial experience was like 8, 9, 10 minutes. And that is awful, right? It's not good enough. That's like if someone walks in to our branch and the windows are cracked and the paint's chipped, people are going to have a really bad first experience. We have to understand that that is where we set the tone for the relationship and really invest in it to make it work. So it's not just, I have it, I need it to be good. I need it to be like uber easy, right? Mm-hmm. Then the next place I would take it to is, I really think there's a lot of efficiencies bank can gain by their internal operations and focusing there with technology. Actually, I think the tools we use are way behind the industry from how computers and file sharing and collaboration takes place. Automation is actually not very expensive at all, like RPA. You can save so much money and deliver a better experience for your customers, and then use that money to reinvest into digital to move us forward.
Patrick, another question we had, and what we hear from clients, sometimes on the board of the bank, there's separate factions. There's the faction, we got to go digital, we have to innovate. And then you have the other faction that's kind of, let's just kind of ride out the wave. We're fine. We have a website. We have an app. Have you seen that as you're speaking with these banks? And do you have any advice on how to bring cohesion between the two?
Yes, I have. And I think that's something that's, it's both, we see it at the board level, but also inside of banks, right? I think there's a division or a tension that's inherent. And I think it's something that can't be ignored. And I kind of referenced this earlier. I don't think you want to handle it by either avoiding it or by trying to exacerbate it by saying, well, that part's digital. Right. I think what matters is everyone has to be able to come together, and you have to put the work in to make that happen. Right. And so that's kind of going back to like some of these exercises I think you can do, like with the board, for example, have everyone go open up an account with Acorns, whether or not they can always close it, but get that experience together. Right. Don't not do it. Or if you have online account opening, likely your board's probably never gone through the process. And get them all to go through the process, right? And so I think the key thing is you got to be able to do it both sides. And like, even an example, one of the things that we did as we were wanting to innovate and change, obviously compliance naturally starts to get a little bit nervous, right? But we also brought in some really cool reg tech. Like there's a company called Mizzen Group that we worked with, and it brought compliance and also into feeling like we too are doing something new. And wow, this is really powerful. And so again, I think the goal is either inside the bank or at the board level. It's how do you build that cohesion together, and what kinds of things can you do to that end?
Thanks for that response, Patrick. And another question I had was, we're in a moment where all the banks are looking at their balance sheets. They're trying to find efficiencies, trying to lower their efficiency ratio. Is there a way or ways to adopt a digital strategy and actually simultaneously lower an efficiency ratio at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is one of the great kind of misnomers, if you will, or the misfocus is all this talk about digital. And it's not wrong that we think about customers or new customers. That's absolutely a way in which digital can help us as banks. But there's a whole other world where so much of how banks run and work and the things that happen haven't kept up with technology. And you can spend energy and time, and it's not a lot, and you can really begin to change how your bank operates and save a lot of money. You can make things faster. You can automate things. You can use tools like RPA I mentioned earlier. That's not hard to do. And what happens is if you take that approach, let's go digital infrastructure first in some ways, and let's say you did that for a year, you'll find likely after that year, you've got several hundred thousands, maybe even millions of dollars you've now saved that you can then more confidently invest into something that's new to say, go get new customers digitally, right? And so to take an approach to say, how do I use technology to operate more efficiently, better, et cetera, is one definitely I think many banks should do. And it's an area that's not talked about enough.
There's a lot of dependence on consultants, on, maybe not pulling those pieces internally.
Right.
What's your take on that at a smaller bank?
I feel very strongly about this. When I first came to Quontic, I'm told we have an IT team, and we have a wonderful IT team. But that IT team is, I think, very reflective of many community bank IT teams, and that it's help desk and systems and networks. They're not developers. And so we have to get developers in-house. And that's where you will be blown away by what they'll do. They'll just instantly start going, wow, you can automate this. We don't have to pay a vendor to do that. Why do we do it that way? It's almost like a candy land for many developers. And so letting IT evolve into technology and development, I think, is one of the most critical things that a bank should start doing.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Thank you for being here, spending your vacation time with us. Your insights are invaluable to community banks. We're all on the same page. I think Brian, I, and you have that really vision and just enthusiasm to keep these community banks relevant and independent and thriving in the digital age. So any banks out there, CEOs, board members, you can contact me. You can contact Brian Love. We can introduce you to Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Brian and Keith. It's always a pleasure. And to your point, yes, very open to talking. We're open books. I'm an open book, and happy to engage, share. And if you're looking for young talent, tech talent for your board, I've got lots of friends who've run fintechs and technology companies. Really, any way I can be helpful, more than happy to. And thank you guys again for having me on the premiere show here. It's an honor. Awesome. See you guys.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.